You hang out around photographers long enough, and eventually they're going to start talking about what it means to photograph, what the photograph does to the world, to the subject. And usually the answer to that is some variation of like, oh, well, we're trying to like hold this moment in time, but we fail. And then, oh, I'm trying to represent this moment or this person, but that's a failure of that action. And I think that's all pretty well trodden territory. But something I've started thinking about recently is, what does it mean to not be photographed? What does it mean to photograph something, to try to hold a moment still, to try to hold someone, something still, to hold someone or something in esteemed enough regard that you would like to have a picture of it forever? And what does it mean when you don't do that? What does it mean when you don't want to do that? When you don't want a picture of someone or of something? When you don't want a memory of someone or something? Because having lived the majority of my life with some kind of image grabbing or image displaying technology, so like a phone to like take pictures on, or like a computer to look at pictures and videos through, I document almost everything, not for the sake of my artistic practice, not for the sake of any like grander purpose, but just for the sake of, sometimes I think something looks cool and I want to take a picture of that, or sometimes I am, more often than not actually, it's not just that something looks cool, that's not enough. It's more so that I'm in a moment that I'm very much enjoying and I want to remember that moment. I want to keep that moment. I want to sort of prove that moment existed, which again goes back to a lot of these old conversations about photography and what it does in its mummification. But then you're experiencing something with other people and you're documenting your time with those people in whatever way that makes sense for you. For me personally, I'm not the kind of person to get in someone's face with a camera or with my phone. I think that that's can be kind of unpleasant. I tend to document spaces a lot, environments, things that I find interesting, but those places immediately remind me of those people. And it's just interesting to think about how some spaces, some events matter differently to different people. How you can be with somebody, and even if you haven't known them for a very long time and you haven't spent that much time together, but that moment means a lot to you and you're documenting it. And when you're looking back at those photographs, they continue to carry that meaning. They continue to mean a lot to you, even if the nature of that connection or of that period in your life has changed to where you're at now. It's still there. But what does it mean when you're not being documented? You're documenting this time of your life and the other person is not documenting that. What does that say? When we say that, oh, a photograph holds time still, it holds this moment still, it's a representation of something. What does it mean when someone doesn't want to have a representation of what it was like to be in that moment with you, where you were actively trying to hold that moment still, they were not doing that? What does that say? And I think it's almost impossible for me in general to look at photography and to look at image making without thinking about the internet, at least in some part, because it has completely changed and warped the way that we think about photography, not just as a tool, but when we observe photography. Everything I don't walk around with a camera that often. I think my intro to photo professor from undergrad is like kicking and screaming in her grave right now because I said that. I think she's still alive. I don't know why I said kicking and screaming in her grave. Um, but you get what I mean. Um, I don't carry a camera with me around a lot, and so I usually am shooting with my phone. And I like shooting on my phone, read in defense of the poor image, whatever. But because I'm shooting on my phone, it feels almost impossible to not look at everything that I'm shooting as having the ability to be a post at some point. Even when I'm shooting with a camera, I have a little Canon point and shoot that I love taking around with me. And even then, I'm like sort of at least half thinking about how that's going to look on a feed, how that's going to look in a carousel of posts. And I think about how the photographs, when I post a series of more personal photographs, I am thinking about how that represents not only me, but how I'm representing the people around me, not through photographs of them, but through photographs of the places that we were in together, how much that time meant to me, whether it was a short amount of time or a long amount of time. I am actively trying to show all of the people that I'm around that they matter by documenting all these moments. And so finally getting to the actual core of this thing, someone I know posted like an Instagram like recap of of their summer, and I wasn't in it, and I was just like, I was in their life for maybe 3 weeks, like very consistently, but those 3 weeks were very intense for me. It was very real. I have a lot of documentation of those 3 weeks, not of that person, but I have a lot of documentation of the places that we hung out at. I have a lot of documentation of the routes that I traveled. I have so much documentation of all of that because I was enjoying myself so much. I was having such a lovely time. And I wanted to remember that. I wanted to hold that moment still, that feeling still, even if it wasn't the moments with that person. I wanted to remember how I felt through the images I was capturing. And the nature of sharing those images is, in a way, just furthering that process of mummification. It is not mummification. It is borderline turning this memory into a trophy, into something to be displayed, to be shared, to be looked at. The act of looking as an act of love. And so when I saw that post, for me, it was just kind of like this weird thing happened where I just suddenly, in spite of every conversation that I've had with this person, just felt like none of it mattered because I wasn't being... It's normally people talk about some kind of alienation when you see yourself online, when you see yourself in something someone else is making or something someone else is sharing. There's like this violent repersonalization that has to occur. That's sort of an interesting thing that photography and the internet have very much in common. When you're being represented, you have to sort of like repersonalize when you look at how you are being represented. However, for once, to not be represented at all actually made me somehow violently repersonalize as well. I lost the ability to be a subject because I wasn't even a subject at all. I was just not there. Even though in reality I was. I know what happened. I have my memories. I have my photographs. I have text messages. I have receipts, of course. But still, that just felt very dissonant in a way that I don't think we used to experience. And I think that it's really really interesting that people don't talk that much about that sort of relationship when we talk about photography. We talk about it very historically. We talk about it with a lot of oeuvre around it, if I pronounce that word correctly. But this is sort of how photography functions now, at least to what I believe. And yeah, I think that's it.
Baba Booey.